Our first guest today is Fred Trotter from Cautious Patient. He's here to chat with us a little bit about the programmable self. Fred, thanks very much for being with us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's the Cautious Patient Foundation.
Oh, okay.
There's a foundation there. I'm trying to learn to say that myself.
Okay.
But the Cautious Patient is the important part. And of course, that's the concept that we're putting forward, which is basically that you have a role to play in your own patient safety. Patient safety movement is the movement to reduce errors in the healthcare system. So you might think of the highway system as naturally dangerous in the same way the healthcare system kind of has natural dangers that you need to be aware of. And in the same way that it's a good idea to take a defensive driving course, it's important for you and your family to become educated in how you can protect yourself from medical error, from misdiagnosis, and from a lot of the common things that can go wrong in a hospital or clinic setting. So that's what my day job is.
Sure.
Now, in the course of my day job, they sponsor me to do essentially anything interesting that I can do to move the ball forward in patient safety. They have been very generous about sponsoring kind of crazy ideas and letting me spend time on stuff that's kind of cutting edge. And that's where I've come up with the programmable self. And the reason for that is, if you want to really make a difference in patient safety and to reduce medical errors, which are a huge problem, somewhere between a third and a fifth of all deaths in the United States are related to medical errors. It's all about human behavior. So how do you change human behavior? That's the question behind programmable self.
How is it related to the quantified self movement?
So one of the things that I think is amazing about the quantified self movement, obviously it is a reference, programmable self, that term is a reference, very intentional bow to the quantified self movement. Quantified self gives you this amazingly rich data source about yourself, your heart rate, your fat percentage, your weight. All of these things we can now conveniently and digitally monitor in a way that kind of automatically just kind of pumps data into the cloud. Someone else's cloud or maybe your own cloud, but automatically pushes data about yourself out. Now, once you have that data, the question that interests me is, can you use that data to try and modify your own behavior? Now, behavior modification is extremely difficult. Most people don't change. I mean, that's like kind of, people say that anecdotally, but it's true. Most people don't change. If you're addicted to something, that's a big problem, and you're probably not going to change from a statistical standpoint, right? So if you've got an issue like I do, eating too much food, that's a very difficult behavior to turn over. If you're smoking, again, very difficult to change. So if we start asking ourselves, well, we have this data about ourselves, can we leverage that data to make a change, to make personal change? That's what I think programmable self is about, and so that's what I'm interested in.
So to facilitate the types of changes that we need, how do you make an obligation to your future self? What are some of the techniques that could be applied there? Okay,
you've obviously read some of the stuff that I've written.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Of course.
So, you know, one of the things that I can't remember, it's I think Odysseus was I can't pronounce that. Odysseus. Anyways, the classic example is, you have this guy, he knows he's going to go hear the siren song. And so he asks his crew to tie him to the post. So that's your present self recognizing that your future self is not going to be able to overcome and do the stuff that they need to do.
Right.
And so that's the first example in history we have of what we would call a personal change contract. And the basic idea is that your present self, for instance, I'm planning on, while I'm at this conference, to run and exercise and do all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
I didn't do that this morning. I didn't do that yesterday morning because my present self is much less likely and much more difficult to motivate.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is, can you create a contract that says, well, I'm going to go ahead and, while I'm at the OSCON conference, I'm going to at least run or jog one time. And if I don't, it's going to cost me $50, or maybe it's going to cost me an embarrassing tweet, or maybe it's going to cost me a post to Facebook that I don't like, or whatever. And I think the notion that you can make a contract with yourself, and that, first of all, just the useful concept that your present self and your future self are not the same person, right? That the person you are right now, we've all got these grand plans about, oh, I'm going to stop eating, or I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to stop overeating. You know, when we make these commitments, it's almost always stuff that our future self doesn't follow through on. And I think that causes a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance in us. And if we start talking about it openly and acknowledging that, yeah, present self is lazy, future self, we're absolutely willing to over-obligate, the need for contracts and that mechanism to come in. And of course, obviously, STICK, STICK.com, is probably the leader in the space of making personal contracts for yourself. And they've some of the behavioral economists who started really pushing this idea started a website that allows you to do that. And I think they're a great generalized service, and I'm very interested in seeing how the open source community can extend the idea that they have to very specific approaches tied into quantified self data. So that's what I'm interested in.
How do you feel like the open source community applies to programmable self? I mean, you mentioned that a little bit, but where do you see that taking place?
I mean, one of the things that I think is absolutely critical is that if you're going to have software and systems that are running you, impacting your own behavior, wouldn't you want to be able to see the code? I mean, I think in many of these cases, open source, open services, just general transparency is really, really important, because if you're talking about stuff, I mean, one of the things that people have approached me said, programmable self, that sounds really spooky. If you're talking about the government programming you, that's not good. And the whole notion is that you program yourself. And so if you were going to program yourself, obviously I think it's really critical that the stack be open.
Right. So last question for you. What is the health internet?
So the health internet is something that's going to happen. It may have already happened. It's probably going to be happening in the next year or 2 years. It's a definitional thing. People don't understand when you say the internet, what you're talking about. The definition of little I internet is an internet protocol network, IP network, that connects different organizations, a network of different organizations. And so when you say the internet, big I internet, what you mean is the largest one of those. So when I say the health internet, what I'm talking about is the largest IP-based network transferring healthcare data.
Okay.
The federal government, in the same way they started DARPANET, is starting a new network called the Nationwide Health Information Network. That, by definition, should become the health internet, which is to say the largest network carrying healthcare data, open network, sometime, well, nowish. I mean, it may have already happened. We don't really know. Nobody's measuring this and then measuring some other network to know when that happens. I think it's going to be clearly, demonstrably several orders of magnitude larger than any other health network in the world, probably sometime in the next 2 years. So this is a coming thing, and I think the health internet is something that people don't understand. I mean, before you heard of the internet, right, would you have thought that you would buy books online? I mean, that just doesn't make sense, right?
It's conceived of it. Right.
You can't conceive it, you can't work it through, but as it turns out, buying books online is a pretty good idea.
It is.
So, you know, you guys at O'Reilly make a pretty good stab at that kind of stuff. And in the same way, we can't imagine what the health internet's going to bring. I mean, once you can move your health data around, once your doctor can send you a complete copy of everything they've got on you and you can give it to whatever service you want, how is that going to change? And I believe that the kind of giants of the coming health internet are going to be more important to our lives than Google or Amazon or these other giants of the original internet, because it's great that I can buy an O'Reilly book from O'Reilly and I can buy other books from Amazon. That's awesome. But who cares? I mean, really. I mean, if I can, say, cut off my own cancer progression, so you catch cancer early, or if I can, make it so I see my grandchildren for 5 more years, I mean, that's huge stuff. I mean, the comparison there is just it's not even in the same category. So one of the things that I think is really exciting about the health internet is small innovations end up having huge impacts in people's lives. So I want to know, and essentially the question I have for the OSCON community is what is going to be built on the health internet? Because these are the people that are going to do it. I mean, you look at Amazon and Google, all these people build on open source software to offer these amazing services in the same way. That's going to happen again with the health internet. So the people wandering around these halls, wandering around this conference are going to change the world in this whole new way using the health internet. And I just can't wait to see what they're going to do.
Right. That's really interesting. Thanks so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.